I spent my whole life building my father's company. While other kids were playing outside, I was learning how to manage inventory. When my friends went on summer vacations, I was in the office handling contracts. I knew every part of the business, every supplier, every deal, every employee by name. I wasn't just my father's daughter, I was his best damn employee. But when it came time to pass the torch, they cut me out without a second thought. "This is a family business," my father said, voice firm. "Nathan will take over." I actually laughed, thinking it was a joke. But when I saw my mother quietly looking away and my brother, arms crossed, wearing the smuggest grin I'd ever seen, I realized it wasn't Nathan. I couldn't believe it. I've been running this company for years. He doesn't even. He's a man, Nathan interrupted, shrugging. This company needs a real leader. I felt like I'd been slapped. You don't even know how the business works. Nathan just smirked. Well, I guess I don't have to. It's mine now. I turned to my father, expecting him to step in, to say something. But he just sighed and shook his head. You'll find something else, he said. You'll be fine. 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 I had poured my entire life into this business. And now I was supposed to just walk away? Nathan sat back in his chair, enjoying every second of my humiliation. I could see it in his face. He thought he won. He thought he had everything wrapped up in a perfect little bow. And for a while, I let him think that. I walked away without a fight. No yelling. No arguing. Because I knew something he didn't. See, my father had a secret. A final move that no one saw coming. And when the lawyer read his will, Nathan's smug face disappeared so fast I thought he might pass out. I should have seen it coming. Nathan had always been the golden child. He could do no wrong even when he did nothing right. He barely showed up to work, didn't know the first thing about running a company, and spent most of his life coasting off our family's wealth. Meanwhile, I was the one keeping everything together. I handled the operations, negotiated with suppliers, kept clients happy, and made sure our company thrived. But none of that mattered. Because at the end of the day, I wasn't Nathan. And worse, I wasn't a man. Dad had always been traditional, but I thought he valued results over outdated gender roles. I was wrong. I was so wrong. The night they told me we were having one of those fake perfect family dinners. The kind where the food was fancy, the conversation polite, but underneath it all, there was something off. Mom kept giving me these little pitying glances. Dad looked tense. Nathan, on the other hand, was smirking like he already knew something I didn't. That should have been my first clue. Dad cleared his throat and set down his fork. We've made a decision. I smiled, completely unaware that I was about to be betrayed in the worst way possible. We're making Nathan the new CEO. At first I laughed. I actually laughed because it was such a ridiculous joke. Then I looked at my father's face. He wasn't joking. And Nathan? Nathan was smirking. The laugh died in my throat. You're serious? Dad sighed, like this was a burden he didn't want to deal with. Like I was inconveniencing him by not immediately accepting this decision. It's what's best for the company, he said simply. I felt my stomach twist. Best for the company? I repeated, my voice shaking. Dad, I run this company. I've been running it for years. Nathan doesn't even know. Nathan rolled his eyes. Relax. I can handle it. Oh, I wanted to punch him. I turned to Mom. Surely she would say something. But she just reached out, squeezed my hand and smiled. You'll always be part of the family, she said softly. Not part of the business. Just the family. I swallowed hard. Dad, are you really doing this? Dad sighed, rubbing his temples like I was being difficult. Nathan's right. This business needs a strong leader. Someone who can handle the pressure. And let's be honest, sweetheart, I knew what was coming. You'll want to settle down someday. Have kids. A family. Running a business like this? That's not for you. I froze. That's not for you. Nathan smirked. She's a woman, Dad. Give the family business to me. The way he said it, so smug, so sure of himself, made my blood boil. I had given everything to this company. Years of my life. I worked harder than Nathan ever had, harder than he ever would, and yet, because of some outdated sexist nonsense, he was the one getting rewarded. I clenched my fists under the table. So that's it? Just like that I'm out? Dad gave me a fake sympathetic smile. You'll land on your feet. Nathan chuckled. Yeah, I hear HR jobs are great for women. I could have fought. I could have screamed. But I knew them. They had already made up their minds. So I stood up, grabbed my purse and walked out. Nathan thought he won. But he had no idea what was coming. Nathan wasted no time making his victory public. Less than 24 hours after I was pushed out, he updated his LinkedIn to CEO of the family business and posted some long-winded caption about new leadership, fresh vision. He took credit for everything I had built, acting as if he had been running the show all along. Worse, he erased me entirely. My name was removed from the company website, my emails were shut down, and overnight, it was like I had never existed. I knew I should have walked away, started fresh, maybe built my own business. But this wasn't just any company, it was my life's work. I had poured everything into it, spent sleepless nights fixing problems, securing deals, and keeping things running while my father took longer and longer vacations. Nathan had barely lifted a finger, yet here he was, sitting on a throne he didn't earn. At first, I told myself it wasn't my problem anymore. But when I started hearing how badly he was screwing up, I couldn't help but watch. And it was worse than I could have imagined. Nathan thought being CEO was all about power lunches and fancy suits. He had no clue how to actually run a company. Within 6 months, he had already made devastating mistakes. He fired long-time employees who had been the backbone of the company. He alienated our biggest clients by increasing prices without warning. He ignored supplier contracts, leading to massive shipping delays. Worst of all, he refused to listen to anyone who actually knew what they were doing. The company was hemorrhaging money. The numbers didn't lie. Profits plummeted, major clients pulled out, and employee morale was at an all-time low. I tried to warn my father. I called him, laid everything out in black and white, expecting him to finally see reason. But he dismissed me with a sigh, as if I was just being difficult. He just needs time, Dad had said, his tone firm. Running a company is hard. You should be supporting your brother, not tearing him down. Supporting him? I had built that company. I had kept it running. And now, because of their blind loyalty, everything was falling apart. But karma wasn't done yet. Because not long after, my father passed away. It was sudden, a heart attack. 1 minute he was fine, the next he was gone. It hit my mother the hardest. No matter how I felt about what had happened, he was still her husband. And despite everything, a part of me grieved too. But Nathan? Nathan only cared about one thing, the company. The moment the funeral was over, he wasted no time calling for a meeting with our lawyer to finalize his official ownership. I wasn't even supposed to be there, but when I got a call from Mr. Calloway, the same lawyer who had handled our family's estate for years, his tone made my stomach tighten. You might want to attend this meeting, he said. I think you'll find it enlightening. So I went. The moment I walked into the office, Nathan groaned. What are you doing here? He sneered, his arrogance practically radiating off him. This is a CEO matter. I didn't say a word, just sat down and waited. Mr. Calloway cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses as he opened the will. All right. As per your father's final wishes, his assets, including controlling interest in the company, will be transferred to his eldest child. Nathan leaned back in his chair, smirking, fully expecting to be handed the company. And then it hit him. The eldest child wasn't him. It was me. The smug expression vanished from his face so fast it was almost comical. He sat frozen, mouth slightly open, his brain struggling to process what had just happened. What? He stammered. That can't be right. Dad promised me. Mr. Calloway didn't even look up. I can only tell you what's in the legally binding document. Your father left you a portion of the business, but the controlling stake, 51%, goes to your sister. Silence. Nathan turned to my mother, expecting her to fix this, but she looked just as shocked as he was. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. I hadn't expected this. That chose me. After everything, he still knew the truth. Nathan was a failure, and I was the only one who could save the company. But Nathan wasn't going down without a fight. And that's when the real war began. Nathan sat frozen for a solid 10 seconds, his face pale as if he had just been punched in the gut. Then, suddenly he snapped. "No," he barked, slamming his hands on the desk. His chair scraped against the floor as he shot up. "This is bullsh*t. Dad promised me the company." Mr. Calloway remained calm, flipping through the documents. "I can assure you, Nathan, this is your father's official, signed, and notarized will. There is no mistake." Nathan turned to my mother, desperate. "Mom, tell them. You know Dad wanted me to run the company." She looked between us, her face a mix of shock and confusion. I don't understand," she whispered. And that's when I knew she hadn't been in on it. Dad must have never told her he had changed the will. What? Maybe he knew she would side with Nathan. Maybe he knew she would have tried to stop him. Maybe, in his own way, he was trying to fix his mistake without facing the backlash while he was still alive. Either way, the damage was done. Nathan, still standing, let out a bitter laugh, running a hand through his hair like a man on the edge. "So that's it? You think you can just waltz in here and take what's mine?" I finally spoke, keeping my voice even. "It was never yours, Nathan. You just assumed it was." His jaw clenched, his eyes burning with rage. "You don't deserve this." "Oh." I tilted my head. "And you do? Tell me, Nathan, what exactly have you done to earn this? Because from where I'm sitting, all you've done is run the company into the ground while I spent years keeping it afloat." His fist shook. "You're just being a spiteful b***t. Nathan," Mr. Calloway interrupted, his voice carrying a warning tone. "I suggest you sit down before you say something you regret." Nathan let out a breath, nostrils flaring, but he finally dropped into his chair. I could tell he was barely holding it together. "This isn't over," he muttered under his breath. I leaned back in my chair. "Oh, I know." And just like that, the war for the company began. I didn't waste any time. The next morning, I walked into the office like I belonged there, because I did. Employees turned to stare as I made my way to the CEO's office, my office now. Nathan was already there, sitting at the desk, his desk, or at least he thought it was. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he snapped. I crossed my arms. "Taking my position as CEO. You know, the one Dad left to me." He laughed, a bitter, disbelieving sound. "Oh, sweetheart, you really think the board is going to listen to you?" I smirked. "I don't think I know." Right on cue, the board members started arriving for an emergency meeting I had called the night before. Nathan's face dropped as they filed in, murmuring amongst themselves, shooting him looks that ranged from frustration to outright anger. Because here's the thing, the board hated Nathan. They saw what he had done in the last year. They saw the clients leaving, the money bleeding, the reputation of the company crumbling under his mismanagement. Nathan tried to argue. He tried to convince them that I was inexperienced, that Dad must have been confused when he wrote the will. But when the numbers came out, when the cold hard facts were laid in front of them, there was only one possible outcome. By a vote of 7-1, Nathan was officially removed as CEO. The only person who voted to keep him? Himself. When the decision was announced, Nathan lost it. "You'll regret this," he spat at me, his face red with fury. "You don't have what it takes. You'll ruin this company." I smiled. "That's funny. Because that's exactly what you've been doing." Security escorted him out of the building. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. Because Nathan? He wasn't done ruining my life yet. At first things seemed fine. I settled into my role as CEO, rolled up my sleeves, and got to work fixing the mess Nathan had left behind. Clients who had bailed under his leadership were starting to return. Employees who had been afraid to speak up before were finally working with confidence again. But then things started going wrong. Little things at first. Financial reports would go missing. Emails would be mysteriously deleted. Vendors would call, confused about contract changes I never made. At first, I chalked it up to errors. Maybe the company was just adjusting to the transition. But then, something happened that made me realize this was no accident. One afternoon, I got a furious call from one of our biggest suppliers. "You screwed us," he shouted. "Canceling our contract with no warning? We've worked together for 10 years. I frowned. What are you talking about? We never canceled anything. Oh really? He snapped. Then why do I have an email from you confirming the cancellation? My stomach dropped. I asked him to forward the email. And when I saw it, my blood ran cold. Because sure enough, there it was. A perfectly worded contract termination email. From my email address. With my signature. Except I never wrote it. Someone had faked it. And I knew exactly who. Nathan. I needed proof. So I set a trap. I called a fake meeting at a nearby hotel, sending an email to all senior managers that I would be gone for the afternoon. Then, instead of leaving, I stayed behind. I sat in a small supply room watching security footage on my laptop, heart pounding in my chest. And then, bingo. Nathan walked in through the back entrance, using a keycard he was no longer supposed to have. I watched, my hands gripping the desk as he marched straight to my office, sat at my desk and started typing on my computer. Within minutes he was sending fake emails under my name, deleting important documents, transferring company funds to an unknown account. I recorded everything. Then I called security. When Nathan heard the footsteps approaching, he froze. His head snapped toward the door just as two security guards stepped in. Mr. Nathan, you need to come with us, one of them said. Nathan laughed, though it sounded nervous. You can't be serious. I stepped out from the supply room, crossing my arms. Oh, I'm very serious. His face dropped. You really thought I wouldn't find out? I asked, tilting my head. That I wouldn't notice you sabotaging my company? He scoffed, but I could see the panic in his eyes. You're making a mistake. Oh no, Nathan. I cut him off, pulling out my phone. You made the mistake. And I have all the proof. I hit play. The security footage played in full view, showing Nathan sitting at my desk, typing away, transferring money, digging his own grave. His face turned white. For the first time he looked afraid. You set me up, he whispered. No, I corrected. You set yourself up. Security escorted him out of the building. But I wasn't done yet. Because this time I was going to destroy him for good. For a brief moment I thought it was over. Nathan had been escorted out, security had revoked his access, and the board officially terminated his employment. But if I knew anything about my brother, it was that he never went down without a fight. And sure enough, the next morning I woke up to a lawsuit. Nathan was suing me. Wrongful termination, defamation, unlawful manipulation of our fathers. Well, I almost laughed at the last one. The same man who spent his whole life acting like the company was his birthright was now claiming that I had somehow schemed my way into the will. It was insane. But the worst part? He had money, he had lawyers, and worst of all, he had Mom. I don't know why I thought she'd stay neutral in all this. Maybe some tiny part of me still hoped she would finally see Nathan for what he was. I was wrong. I found out through a board member that my mother had posted Nathan's bail after he was arrested for the fraud. With her own savings. When I confronted her, she just sighed. He's my son, she said, as if that explained everything. I felt like she had slapped me. I'm your daughter, I shot back. And he's trying to destroy me. She just shook her head. You should have just let him run the company. This wouldn't be happening. If you hadn't taken it from him. Taken it from him? It was never his. But in her eyes, he would always be the one who mattered. That's when I realized something painful. I had lost my father. And now I had lost my mother too. And Nathan? Nathan was still out there plotting. The lawsuit dragged on for months. Nathan tried everything to make me look bad. He spread rumors that I had bribed the lawyer to change Dad's will. He claimed I had been embezzling money from the company. He even got former employees to testify that I was unfit to run the business. It was exhausting. But I had one thing on my side. The truth. And then, right before the final court hearing, I got a call from my lawyer. There's something you need to see, he said, his voice urgent. He sent me a document. One that had been buried deep in my father's records. A second will. Dated 6 months before his death. And this one? It was completely different. My stomach dropped as I read the document. Because this will left the company to me. Cut Nathan out completely. Didn't give him a single cent. This was before the final version, the one that gave Nathan a small stake. But why would Dad have changed it? And then, I noticed something strange. The signatures were different. I sent both wills to a forensic specialist. A week later I got the results. Dad's final will, the one that gave Nathan a portion of the company, had been forged. Nathan faked the will. And Mom knew. I sat in my lawyer's office, gripping the report with shaking hands. Nathan had faked the second will. He knew Dad never wanted him to have the company. Instead of accepting it, he manipulated Mom into helping him change it. That's why she stood by him through everything. That's why she supported his lawsuit. She knew. She helped him. I felt sick. I confronted her that night. She didn't even deny it. He deserved a chance, she said quietly. Your father was being unfair. Unfair? I yelled. He chose me, Mom. You helped Nathan commit fraud. She closed her eyes, looking tired. I did what I had to do. That was the last time I ever spoke to her. Nathan always thought he was untouchable. Even after getting arrested. Even after losing the company. Even after the fraud was exposed. He still believed he could weasel his way out. And for a while, it seemed like he might. Because my mother hired the best lawyers she could afford to reduce his sentence. But what she didn't realize, I wasn't done yet. I wanted Nathan to suffer. Just like he made me suffer. And I still had one last card to play. Nathan was arrogant. Careless. He thought he could get away with anything. So I started digging. I hired a private investigator to look into his past financial dealings. And within 2 weeks we hit gold. Nathan had been stealing long before Dad died. He took hundreds of thousands from company accounts. He funneled money into a secret offshore account. He used company funds to pay off gambling debts. He signed fraudulent contracts in the company's name. I took everything I found and sent it to the IRS, the FBI, the press. And just like that, Nathan wasn't just facing fraud charges anymore. He was under federal investigation. The trial that destroyed him? That was next. The moment Nathan realized I had buried him, he tried to cut a plea deal. He begged for a reduced sentence, hoping his lawyers could pull one last trick to save him. But the prosecutors had too much evidence. The fraud, the forged will, the financial theft. It was all there, airtight. He was found guilty on all counts. Corporate fraud, forgery, embezzlement, wire fraud. The judge didn't go easy on him. Not this time. Nathan was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. No early parole. No second chances. For the first time in his life, Nathan had to face the consequences of his actions, and I made sure everyone knew who exposed him. My mother begged me for mercy. After the verdict, she came to my office looking older, tired, like a woman who had finally realized she backed the wrong child. Tears filled her eyes as she said, "Please, he's your brother." I stared at her for a long moment before answering. "No. He was your son, not mine." She wiped her eyes and whispered, "You've already taken everything from him. Just let it go." I actually laughed. "Let it go? Like how you let me go? Like how you helped Nathan forge Dad's will?" She flinched. "You deserve to lose him," I said, my voice cold. "You deserve to know what it feels like to watch your family betray you." She started to say something else, but I turned and walked away. I never spoke to her again. Nathan went to prison and I made sure he stayed there. Every few months I'd get updates. He tried to act tough and got beaten up within his first week. No one respected him because they all knew he was a fraud. He had no money, no power, no influence, just a prison cell. My mother lost everything trying to pay for his legal battles. She sold her house, moved into a small apartment and lived alone. Meanwhile I thrived. I rebuilt the company from the ground up, doubled our revenue within 3 years and became exactly the leader Dad always knew I could be. I never looked back. And the best part? Nathan will be in his tiny prison cell for the next 15 years, thinking about how he could have had it all if only he hadn't been so greedy. Karma always comes around. Nathan believed he was the rightful heir to the company. Mom believed I should have just stepped aside. But in the end I won. Not because I stole anything. Not because I schemed or lied. I won because I earned it. And they destroyed themselves. That's what real revenge looks like. Nathan thought he could manipulate his way out of trouble, But he didn't realize I wasn't done yet. Prison was just the beginning of his downfall. I wanted him to feel every ounce of betrayal, every shred of humiliation, and every single consequence of his greed. The first step? Making sure his financial ruin was absolute. Since he was convicted of fraud and embezzlement, the court ruled that he had to pay back every cent he stole, plus damages. But here's the thing, Nathan didn't have the money. He had spent most of it trying to maintain the flashy lifestyle he thought he deserved. His house, gone. His car, repossessed. His secret offshore accounts, seized by the government. His luxury watches, designer suits, and expensive gadgets, auctioned off to pay his debts. Then came his final humiliation, Mom losing everything because of him. She had drained her own savings trying to keep him out of prison. She had taken out loans, sold off jewelry, even begged family members for money. But in the end it wasn't enough. She had to sell her house, the house we grew up in, to cover the remaining costs. The house she had always believed Nathan would inherit. Now, she was living in a cramped, low-income apartment, utterly alone, abandoned by the very son she sacrificed everything for. And me? I didn't lift a finger to help. But that wasn't enough. Nathan needed to feel the weight of everything he lost. So, I did one final thing. I made sure everyone in our old social circle knew the truth. Business contacts, investors, old classmates, friends. I made sure his name was poison. I leaked every dirty deal he ever made, every scam he pulled, every reckless financial decision. The media picked it up, and soon enough, Nathan became infamous. Articles were written about him, exposing his downfall as a cautionary tale about greed. Companies blacklisted him. No one wanted to be associated with him. Meanwhile, I was thriving. I took the company to new heights. Under my leadership, it became more profitable than ever before. Our competitors, who once saw us as a sinking ship, now wanted to partner with us. Investors who had been hesitant under Nathan's leadership were now eager to work with me. And every single time I signed a major deal, every time the company made headlines for its success, I made sure Nathan saw it. Oh, prison TV. I arranged for our company to be featured in a business segment that played in the prison common area. Nathan was forced to watch as I succeeded in the role he believed he was entitled to. He had nothing but a rock-hard cot and a tiny cell while I was out there living the life he thought he deserved. And the best part? Nathan had no one left. Mom stopped visiting him after a year, realizing he only called her to beg for money she no longer had. His old friends abandoned him. His former colleagues mocked him. No one respected him. No one cared. For 15 years, Nathan will sit in that prison cell, knowing that his downfall wasn't just bad luck. It was his own doing. His arrogance, his greed, his entitlement, it all led him here. And that's the kind of revenge that lasts. Not just beating someone, but making sure they know they lost. I didn't just win back what was mine. I destroyed him. And I slept like a baby every night knowing it. The end.